general elections in Nigeria held successfully. And whereas the presidential and national assembly elections held on 23rd of February 2019, the gubernatorial and state assemblies held on 9th and 9th of March. Supplementary elections were, however, held a few days ago on 23rd of March. And in the course of the election, we observed as an independent voice that monitored the election that the Nigerian Army played a very critical role and quite commendable, and roles that had good impact on the outcome of the election. And some of the rules are what the roundtable and this press conference seeks to address, so that we could be able to speak and mention to the world the significance and impact of their rules. One, we noted and observed that there were prompt arrival of election materials to respective polling units, which was attributable to the cozy, conducive atmosphere created by the Nigerian Army, because they were deployed to respective states and polling units where elections were conducted, especially in volatile states and states that were considered to be combustible states. So we noticed that and observed that because of the conducive, safe atmosphere that they provided, personnel of INEC were able to arrive at the centers on time without interference. So it was significant. And this is unusual, again, the practice that had been in time past. So generally, we noted that election materials and personnel arrived promptly in 90% of polling units that elections were held across the country. Also, we noticed that and observed that part of the impact made by the security and secured environment provided and availed by the Army was the fact that INEC staff members and ad hoc staff members were deployed, unencumbered, unhindered, untouched by either hoodlums or violent bandits and other people. So INEC staff members and the ad hoc staff members were deployed, and they arrived at respective polling units on time, and they tried to conduct their elections very properly. Part of the impact that the services of the men of the Nigerian Army provided as well is the inability to compromise people who worked at respective posts. The presence of officers and men of the Nigerian Army in some parts of the country halted significantly the incident of compromising and inducing INEC staff during the elections. There were cases in which politicians offered ad hoc officials money, but the offers were turned down. We noticed and reported that there were offers given in parts of the country like Lagos, where presiding officers were offered 5,000, but they refused because of the presence of men and women, of course, officers of the Nigerian Army. The presence of the men and officers of the Army as well prevented violence, kidnap, assaults, and killings across the country. They forestalled the incidents of kidnap in most parts of the country during the elections. In Ohoada West Local Government area of Rivers, Ndoni, Ogba, Egbama, Ndoni Local Government, bloody clashes between voters and party supporters were averted. The security provided by the Nigerian Army after the incident of gunfire in neighboring communities of Maiduguri enabled peaceful conduct of polls in Borno State. We know how volatile Borno had been. Nobody thought that election would have held in Borno State and parts of Yobe State. But for the environment, the conducive state that the Army was able to provide, elections were held without incidents. Despite the attack by insurgents in Geidam area during the election, the Nigerian Army provided enough security to ensure that elections were held peacefully in Yobe State. The secured environment provided by the Army halted a violent clash between party agents and INEC officials in some parts of Sokoto State as well. The environment provided by the Army prevented voter intimidation in Ogbomosho South local government area of Oyo State, where armed thought attempted to force voters to show their ballot papers after voting, an action that would have greatly discouraged several voters from voting. Furthermore, part of the impacts created by the presence of men of the Nigerian Army was the prevention of vote buying. You know, Nigeria, one of the factors and crises that had hitherto ambushed our electoral process is the issue of vote buying. Politicians are often in the habit of going to polls and trying to induce voters, trying to gratify them. But for the availability and presence of men and women of the Nigerian Army in the recent poll in Nigeria, we realized and observed that vote buying was minimized significantly. The trend of vote buying and bargain for higher amount of vote and selling of them in most parts of the country has been a problem in our electoral system. However, the presence of officers and men of the Nigerian Army in some parts of the country prevented the incidence of vote buying and selling by 85%. Report has it that in Oke-Balogun Epe local government area of Lagos State, the presence of officers and men of the Nigerian Army scared off party agents who were seen writing down the names of voters who were expected to collect about 12,000 naira each. Officers and men of the Army were poised on cracking down on supporters of mainstream parties, disguising as members of smaller parties to buy votes for their parties, as well as agents of smaller parties who were influenced to purchase votes on behalf of the dominant parties. Furthermore, the availability and presence of Nigerian Army members prevented what we had experienced in other previous polls, underage voting. We realized that this menace was minimized to significantly about 93%. There were no incidents as much as we used to have it, as much as we had it even in 2015 poll. This year's electoral poll, the incidence of underage voting was greatly reduced, and this is quite attributable to what the Nigerian Army did. Intimidation and harassment of voters. The presence of officers and men of the Nigerian Army minimized different forms of threats, harassment, intimidation, and assault from politicians by 85%. These attempts by politicians are aimed at undermining the system, usually to favor the perpetrators. The absence of officers, or rather the presence of officers and men of the Army, averted attempts by political thugs to abduct observers in parts of Akwa Ibom State and Shendam local government area of Plateau State. The presence of officers and men of the Nigerian Army foiled the attempt to kidnap INEC officials in Benue State, Katsina State, Kogi State, Imo State, Akwa Ibom State, and Rivers State during and after the collation of results. Even attempts to burn electoral commissions offices and electoral materials and ballot papers in parts of Ebonyi State were averted. In the nutshell, we wish to reiterate to the African and international community that the Nigerian Army, as ably led by Lieutenant General Tuku Burutai, the Chief of Army Staff, conducted her affairs in the most professional manner during and after the 2019 elections in Nigeria. The Nigerian Army upheld human rights issues in relation to security forces' role in the 2019 elections in Nigeria. The Nigerian Army maintained security objectives and strategy in relation to the 2019 elections in Nigeria. The Nigerian Army deployed very high standards of professional, impartial, neutral, and non-intimidating conduct during the 2019 elections in Nigeria. The Nigerian Army employed good contact mechanism and liaison between the electoral management stakeholders and security forces during the 2019 elections in Nigeria. Finally, the Nigerian Army's involvement in the 2019 elections in Nigeria started and ended with the provision of a peaceful and secured environment for the conduct of the elections. In this regard, the Army played a very significant role in the peaceful, free, fair, and transparent conduct of the 2019 elections in Nigeria against the spurious allegations from some quarters to discredit the professionalism and ethical standards deployed by the Army. We therefore call on all Nigerians to support the Nigerian Army in discharge of their constitutional duties. Thank you very much. Long live Federal Republic of Nigeria. Long live Africa. God bless you.